What's up, guys? I'm Ernie. I'm back with the Face Off Sports Network, and today we're going to go over three of my favorite wide receiver sleepers for the 2025 year. First, we're going to kick it off with Tre Harris. It's one of my absolute favorite rookie receivers. I couldn't have asked for a better landing spot. It was a perfect match made in heaven. The Chargers, they wanted an X receiver, and they got one of the better ones in the class. So when you break down his numbers, the numbers really do speak for themselves. He was number one in yards per route run at 5.2. He was number one in receiving yards per game at 128. Averaged 17.2 yards per reception, and he had a 70% success rate versus pressing man. So those are really, really good numbers. Before his injury, and this is why a lot of people thought he fell to round two and he could have been a first round pick. He was top six in targets in the country, number two in receptions in the country, number three in touchdowns in the country. And Harborough actually wanted to draft him in the first round. That's how high they were on him. He could definitely coexist with Ladd. Again, he's going to play the X. Ladd's going to play the slot. So think of Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams. And those were when Herbert had some of his biggest years. So I think that's what's going to happen to this offense. I think Tre Harris is going to, help open up this offense. I think, you're going to see Tre Harris just, fit so perfectly into that Mike Williams role, and Ladd McConkey is still going to be Ladd McConkey from the slot. I think both of these guys are going to eat. Um, and again, this is a bold take. I wouldn't be surprised if Tre Harris went for 1,000 yards this year. I do think Herbert is still an elite quarterback. He was going one or two in super flex drafts 2 years ago. The Chargers, they took a dip. They didn't have the coach. The offensive line wasn't set. The receivers were getting old and injured. Harborough came up, kind of changed the culture there, and now he's building an offense to set up Justin Herbert to succeed. And I think you're going to see the Justin Herbert of a couple years ago. I think he's going to really be able to air it out to these guys. So Tre Harris is one of my favorite rookie sleepers this year. My second sleeper is Kyle Williams of the Patriots. Again, this is another player that I love. I thought he was one of the best separators in the class. If it wasn't for Egbuka, he might be the number one separator. He had some really good reps if you watch his film. He had a win versus Travis Hunter. So there is a lot of upside here. They spent day two capital on him. He was borderline second round pick. Patriots took him at the top of round three. And here's why I love Kyle Williams. So right off the bat, he's going to play the slot, and you go back to Drake May's days at Chapel Hill. He loved throwing to a slot receiver. That's why Josh Downs had some of those big years. And so he could coexist with Stephon Diggs, right? So Stephon Diggs is going to play on the outside. I think Kyle Williams is going to play the slot. So I think right off the bat, year one, there's going to be PPR value here. Okay. And then depending on the talent, which I do like, it could be more of a boom. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Stephon Diggs is 31. He's coming off a torn ACL injury, and they're already having like off the field issues with him. I think most people are like kind of familiar with the boat incident by now. So, this leaves even more upside on the table here, because let's say they cut Stephon Diggs, which I actually read was a real possibility. Again, I don't know how true this is, but when you look at his 3-year contract, it really was a 1-year contract, right? And again, I think they were just trying to get some reliable targets around their quarterback that they're trying to develop in Drake May. So I kind of like Stephon Diggs because in theory, he's Drake May's number one receiver. But what I don't like his age. I don't like that he's coming off an injury. His numbers were going down in Buffalo. He looked decent from the slot last year in Houston. But, Vrabel is a kind of, no BS coach. And I don't know how much he's going to put up with Stephon Diggs. So again, if they cut him, Kyle Williams just goes from, a PPR value and flex to a boom, and who knows, he could already be, the guy even when Stephon Diggs is there, because the analytics and the numbers tell you that, Stephon Diggs is in a point in his career where he could easily fall off. So Kyle Williams is my second favorite sleeper. And third, we'll wrap it up with Cedric Tillman. So I love Cedric Tillman. This kid is a stud. This is an awesome late stab and all startups, redrafts, right? So when you break down his profile, he was a third round pick out of Tennessee. He's your typical X receiver. Really big catch radius, could run good routes. He ran a 4.5, and at his size, that's really good. He was probably one of the more athletic performers at the wide receiver position for the combine his year 2 years ago. And you could back that up with his 9.22 RAS score. So, he is very athletic. And I think a year three breakout is coming. Again, it took Nico Collins till year three to break out. So it's not like these things are uncommon. And when kind of look at Cedric Tillman and it's like, why didn't he really produce? Well, I think it was because he was buried on the depth chart, right? And I also think the quarterback play was, kind of sucked. So then they traded Amari Cooper, right? And Jameis Winston comes in, everybody's favorite fantasy quarterback, because wide receivers just explode with him. And lo and behold, Cedric Tillman takes off, right? And with Jameis Winston, there was a 4-game stretch because Cedric Tillman, unfortunately, then got a concussion and he was out for the rest of the year, right? But that 4-game stretch with Jameis as the starting X receiver, he had 24 catches, 302 yards, 92 yak yards, and 3 touchdowns. So, again, the upside is there. I think this kid's legit. Who knows how long they play Flacco? That's the one downside of this where it's like, maybe he plays half the year. Maybe they ride him out throughout the entire year. That would be even better, right? Because then you're going to hope that, Gabriel or Shador steps up whenever they try to get a look at their rookie, see if they got something for the future. You're going to hope they could be able to get them the ball. But we know Cedric Tillman is pretty much the other Jameis Winston in the NFL, right? Father time, just he is awesome for fantasy. Like you saw him revive players like Josh Downs when he took over. So I love Joe Flacco. I think for fantasy purposes, he is an awesome match with Tillman. And, for me, I think Tillman is an easy buy with Flacco. That's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for joining us. I hope, you use these sleepers and they help win your leagues. Catch you next time.